Before we begin, thank you very much to Kirkus, the half-French druid, for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you for using a reference to the D&D game that we play. That was very funny. So, said D&D game, Scheduled Conflicts, is Thursday as of the posting of this video, which means we have a new episode that we'll be playing live at Gob the Goblin's Twitch channel at 9 p.m. Eastern. Last episode ended off on a cliffhanger that involved my character's backstory finally coming back to haunt him. I am so excited to play tonight because, I'm expecting emotional damage. So I'll leave a link in the description. Please come out tonight if you are curious about what trauma my character is about to experience. Should be interesting. So, today it is all about names. Specifically, we are going to be going through some of the weird naming things that was going on during the Unicron trilogy. Keep in mind that while Hasbro was in a period of reinvention, creating new characters, etc., there's a lot of things they did to try and hold on to the past. There's a lot of name dumping that goes on in the Unicron trilogy, especially during Cybertron. We're not going to get so much into name dumping as we are just a lot of the strangeness, because when you think back, like, Transformer naming conventions seem to be pretty consistent until you hit that early to mid 2000s era, and then everything just kind of goes off the rails. And that's kind of what we're here to explore so far. But before we even get into characters, we have to talk about something that we take for granted a lot, and that is the name of the size classes. Because today it's pretty uniform, right? We've had Deluxes, Voyagers, Leaders, and all that for a long time now. And frankly, I'm still not even sure what quantifies something to be called Voyager size. I'm still not sure that makes sense, but it's a term we got during the Unicron trilogy, but it's not the first one we got. During Armada, you had this list, which also makes very little sense. So, Minicon is obvious. It's the Minicon size class. It's where your Minicon multi-packs were. And then stepping up is the Supercon, which we call a Deluxe now. And then moving up to MaxCon, GigaCon, Super Base, and then Supreme. Super Base. Now keep in mind, there was only one toy at that size, and that was Optimus Prime. So, okay, he could get away with having a size class based solely off of what he turned into, but Supercon and Super Base is already super weird, right? Ultracon would have been a thing, I guess, something like. I don't like the inconsistency there, or the repetition of the super. But also, they kind of broke it for the Supreme. Unicron was Supreme scale, which was originally a $40 size toy in previous lines. So it's already a little bit weird. And this was annoying to keep track of. I think a lot of people got MaxCon and GigaCon backwards back in the day. But that's not it. We can move on to Energon, where we changed all of the size class names. So for a year, you had to get used to all of these new ones. Keep in mind, Beast Wars and Beast Machines all use the same standard names, and then they switched everything up for this series. So Energon, you had your smallest class, which were Energon figures. And I don't mean Energon figures that had Energon stuck to their name, like Energon Hotshot. No, I mean Energon size figures. And you thought the whole core series thing for Rise of the Beast was confusing. It's not enough to name the size class after the series that it's in, but to also tack the word onto specific character names later on for their repaints. Great job, Hasbro. Stepping up, the Deluxes are combat class, which implies that a lot of these are not designed for combat. Mega Combat. Do you not have enough Mega Combat? Do you not have enough combat? Try Mega Combat. So you have Combat and Mega Combat. Do you have Ultra Combat? No. Giga Combat? No. You have Commander. Well, Commander's a little bit different than it is now. It's about 3 times as expensive. But no, that's what GigaCon became. And then now we have multiple figures at the $40 price point, so we can't just call it Super Base. No, we have to call it Leader now, which I think is the right call, because anyone that would call Energon Optimus's base a Super Base is super high on something. So, completely new naming scheme for all the size classes. This one we couldn't keep straight either, but I think this one was at least printed on the package, so at least you had some semblance of an idea. And then Cybertron happened. And Cybertron went all over the place. Cybertron brought back some old terminology, kept some terminology from the previous series, and then invented some new ones while they were at it. So now your smallest was called a Scout. Okay, all right, fine. Now Voyager, now Deluxe at 10, so they brought back Deluxe from Beast Machines and RID. Voyager, this is where it starts getting confusing. I'm still not entirely sure why Voyager is a word you attach to a size. Even when they first used it, it's not especially clear, because like all of these kind of like just sound like levels of like toy quality or toy size, and then Voyager, they pulled like a Starfleet designation or something. Voyager class cruiser or something. I don't know. And then Commander became Ultra. And then Leader is the only one who stayed the same. But keep in mind, in Energon, they didn't have a Supreme class. Unicron and Omega Supreme didn't have a size class listed. So they brought Supreme back from Armada to be Primus and Starscream. So for 3 years, we had to completely rethink about the naming scheme. Every single year, everything came out. Now, like I said, everything after Cybertron kind of normalized things. You know, Deluxe and Voyager, we still have. You know, Leader, we still have. So a lot of that did calm down a little bit. But man, it was really weird for 3 years there. And now we can get into the names. Starting with things like Scattershot. Scattershot being intentionally spelled with an O instead of an E, which would have been the G1 name. They tried to get this name in for years, by the way. At one time, Scattershot was going to be the name of Energon Six-Shot. But by the time they finally settled on it, I believe the trick was copyright, that Scattershot was already trademarked somewhere else, so they had to intentionally misspell it in order to keep the name. That's how much you know they really wanted that name, if they're going to intentionally misspell it. That's just a weird thing, though. I mean, that's just kind of like odd. That's fine. I mean, we went through Beast Wars where we had a laser beak spelled with an O. So I guess there's been worse. My favorite one, however, is Breakdown, because they spelled it B-R-A-K-E, not B-R-E-A-K, as would be the traditional G1 spelling. No, so I remember the story at the time was that they wanted to attach the name Breakdown to a licensed vehicle, like an alternator, but they didn't. But they found out that car companies really didn't like you referring to their car as a breakdown. Okay, I guess I understand that, and Hasbro thought changing it to brake, as in the part of the car, and you're putting the brake down. That was somehow better. I don't think it was, because you're audibly still saying breakdown. So, I remember that being the story back in the day, but I can't find record of it now, and it's not on TF Wiki. So maybe it is just as simple as trademark, issues, and then we just invented it for fun. You know, I thought it was supposed to be attached to an alternator, but I couldn't really find a record of that. So we have Breakdown instead, which I guess is a fun name for like the old coot of the team. Speaking of, he had other interesting naming conventions, because the repaint was Breakdown GTS. GTS, Gran Turismo Sport. It's something they tacked on to the race versions of cars back in the day. So this is okay, especially for your Velocitron crew. That kind of makes sense. But they also stuck GTS to the end of Override, and they also did it to the end of Ransack. And the last one is funniest to me because, to my knowledge, motorcycles do not compete in Gran Turismos. It's kind of a car thing. But I do know there are models of motorcycle that use GTS, so could be wrong. Not a racing guy. It's still kind of funny that they thought that was the cool terminology to stick on to 3 of their Cybertron repaints instead of just, I don't know, making the names cool. Now, let's talk about name switching. All right, so we know some of these characters here. So we take a look at Mirage from Energon. We know that was originally Tidal Wave in Armada, reformatted into a new body. So then Mirage not quite making sense for a boat, but I guess it's a stealth boat, speedboat. Okay, kind of pass it off. Still weird that they saw the need to change his name because he's the same character. You know, Snowcat's the same way. It's still Cyclonus, maybe a little bit more insane, but it's still the same character, just reformatted into a new body. And then there's this guy. Demolishor stayed Demolishor. He's the only one, like, well, Starscream as well, I guess, but like, why did he keep his name? Because in series, his memory got wiped. So if you're going to rename anyone, you'd think it would be him because he is the new character. The others are just continuations, but they're the ones that had to change the name. I don't understand this in the least. I mean, it's not a mind, you know, I guess it's just like if Megatron wiped your mind, then he just wanted you to keep your name for the lulz because he did the same thing to Starscream. I guess that's the logic of it. There is no logic of it. It's just super odd choice on the trademarking side of things. Let's move on. Who else? Let's go back to Armada for something. Well, we've talked about this before. Wheeljack. Aaron Archer did not think the name Wheeljack sounded like a good guy because the phrase carjack is a thing. So, so jacking someone's wheels sounds like you're stealing wheels off of their car. That was the logic. Apparently completely oblivious to the fact that a car jack is a jack is an actual tool to repair a car, especially if you need your wheels repaired. A jack of some kind is usually vital for that. So we have an evil Wheeljack, though he was an Autobot, then became a Decepticon. So I guess at some point it was a good guy name. Okay, fine, I'll give that one to you. Whatever. But it got weirder the next year when this guy showed up, and Aaron Archer and the rest of the Transformers crew was like, we can't name him Wheeljack, we just use that name. So, never mind the fact that, it looks exactly like G1 Wheeljack. We can't call it Wheeljack, apparently, because we just had the name. We just used it last year, so we can't. We called him Downshift instead. Here's the problem. Last year had a downshift as well. So I guess that didn't really qualify. Now, did it? Here's another list. Here's a quick list for you of characters who appeared in Energon who also had names that appeared in Armada, such as Prowl. There was an Armada Prowl as well. There was also a Storm Cloud. There was also an Ironhide. There was also an Inferno. Oh, and yeah, there was also a Mirage as well, come to think of it. Oh, but the list I just mentioned, all 6 of those names were previously attached to Minicons. This is Minicon Inferno, just so we're clear. He didn't magically become Energon Autobot Inferno from a Minicon. They just happen to share the same name. Like coming across multiple Tims in your life, or multiple Seans in your life. So this is just a weird naming convention, and it's horribly unfair to the Minicon. Like, okay, so what if the name was attached to a Minicon, somehow their name is not sacred or important? Excuse me for kind of assuming that, the whole series of Armada, kind of revolves around the Minicons. Excuse me if I forget that was, literally the most important thing for the franchise in a year, so why wouldn't the names be treated just a little bit more sacred than that? Well, I guess when the show can't keep track of who Grindor and Leader 1 are, I guess that kind of goes with the territory. Okay, alright, so lots of Minicons lost their names, but, of course we can't have Wheeljack in Energon. We can move on to other ones. Thundercracker had a really weird situation, so in Armada, Starscream gets his super mode and where he turns blue and states to himself, I look like Thundercracker. And meanwhile, the toys were sold as 2 completely separate characters with different bios on the boxes. Well, we kind of assume that, he changed his appearance later because the Thundercracker who appeared in Cybertron looks absolutely nothing like Armada Thundercracker. The fact they're just both jets, and that's about the only commonality they actually seem to share. And this happened again. Now, instead of jumping from Armada to Energon, let's jump from Armada to Cybertron and see how that went for everybody. So on top of, Thundercracker, we also had Dirt Boss, also a Minicon in Armada, but now it's a deluxe Decepticon. Sideways. Now, Sideways was obviously not a Minicon in Armada. He's kind of one of the major antagonist characters. I think it's more amusing that Hasbro had this exact same gimmick coming up, that the same characters, remember, Hotshot in Cybertron is supposed to be Hotshot in Armada, and vice versa for Red Alert, Optimus Prime. The characters who have lasted, throughout the trilogy, they should know this. They should see this coming. When someone named Sideways comes up, you should probably be a little bit sus. Just a little bit suspicious. No, you weren't. They got caught unawares again. Oh no, Sideways, how could you do this just like you did, 2 shows before? Armorhide's also another name that made that hop over from one side to the other. So is Swindle. Again, these are Minicons that became larger figures, but also we all have the case of Jolt, who is a Minicon in Armada and a Minicon in Cybertron. And you might almost suspect that it would be the same Jolt, just reformatted into a different body, except this one is specifically tied to Vector Prime, which means that is out the window too. So 2 completely different helicopter Minicons named Jolt now exist in this universe. All right, so keeping that one straight as well. Cool. Cybertron Minicons in general had some interesting naming conventions. A few that made not a whole lot of sense. So we had a run of 2-pack Minicons that were just like this really weird thing they did at the tail end to bulk out the line. And those tended to have some interesting names. A lot of them were name dumps from, from RID and earlier Unicron trilogy all the way back to like Beast Wars. Terrorsaur was a name they dumped onto one of them. So, when you take a look at those, you come across interesting names, like the fact that one of them was named Thunderblast. 2 characters in Cybertron were named Thunderblast at the same time. One of them was this missile truck, and the other one was, the one. The one obvious girl in the show. The one who is very overtly anime girl. Kind of a hard contrast. I'm not even sure why anyone doing the naming at Hasbro decided they needed to double dump the name Thunderblast. It's not a great name in the first place. I don't think it's a name worth protecting. And I don't think trademarking 2 toys with the same name in the same year really helps you hold to a trademark that well. We also have Kobushi, which literally just means small warrior in Japanese. Not kind of literal in the naming, but okay. We'll just randomly throw one Japanese name into the line, because why not? And then Monocle, a character named after an eyepiece who you can tell has a visor, so they technically might not even have eyes. Great naming. Great naming. There's also Scatterbrain, which only amuses me because he also has that weird misspelling of the word scatter, even though there's literally no reason for him to have it. I guess consistency is important. And then we wrap it up with probably the worst one of the whole thing, and that is what poor Megatron went through. Every single time the poor boy got a repaint, they had to name it Galvatron. So, of course, of a 20-year story, he went from Megatron to Galvatron to Megatron to Galvatron to Megatron to Galvatron. And more importantly than that, he went from Megatron to Galvatron to a Megatron who looked like Galvatron, to a Galvatron who actually looked like Galvatron, to a Megatron who looked like Unicron, to a Galvatron who looked like Megatron. I think I would have preferred Megatron GTS. So there you go. it's a miracle we got through and can keep anything straight in the Unicron trilogy. It just seems like the names were just like thrown on the dartboard, just wherever it stick. Good, name it. That's the name. Whatever. And you know what? Good on Hasbro. At least you got a lot of name dumps in there and a lot of weird things trademarked that you've never used since. But hey, good on you. At least you kept us on our toes. So that's what we had to deal with in the 2000s. That's your education for the day. Thank you everyone for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.